Benjamin, you mentioned compliance, which is a word you don't hear very often in the new strata of the NCAA. But I'm particularly curious, as somebody who has been a player and who had a very long and distinguished NFL career, what your thoughts are on where we are at this moment in time, just a few weeks after players can now start making money.
Well, I'm catching up just like everybody else, and it seems like everybody else is kind of catching up even though they thought they knew what the rules were going to be. Different rules in different states and all this, and there seems to be an overwhelming feeling even in speaking with different coaches from teams that they're just trying to protect their student athletes while also allowing them to maximize their potential and their money-making capability off of their likenesses. There seems to be this idea that people are for it, but also don't want athletes to be exploited. That's my feeling as well. You know, it's long overdue, in my opinion. I mean, I remember walking into stadiums around the SEC and seeing people wearing our jerseys and wondering why can't we benefit from the revenue that's being brought in. And so there's an excitement there, but there's also, I think, a bit of hesitation simply because the rules are not super clear and nobody wants to see anybody taken advantage of.
On that front, there seems to be some concern, though, that this will become the wild, wild west where the better schools will figure out a way to, I don't know if manipulate's the right word, but they'll figure it out. I mean, not that an average run-of-the-mill football school can't, but do you think we are moving toward a day when compliance just becomes a forgotten word in college athletics?
Well, there's an evolution. And things evolve. I mentioned social media before and the fact that there's more exposure now. Things have to evolve. You can't have the same archaic rules that we had 10, 20 years ago. It's just not going to work in this environment. Players understand their agency. They understand their earning power. I think coaches understand that. NCAA understands that. And so this is a step in the right direction. But there needs to be the due diligence, I would say, to protect from those things happening. As far as larger schools, look, schools that are in the Power 5, schools that are perennial powerhouses, they're always going to be able to use things like this to their advantage. They're going to have more resources. They have larger fan bases. They have deeper pockets. They have more companies wanting to touch and hold their players and do deals with their players. And so they're going to benefit from this for sure. But at the same time, when we talk about balancing the revenue for players, I think this is an avenue that, again, is long overdue.
Benjamin, in relation to this time in history, I mentioned the NIL, but there's so many other things happening. I mean, we are a year past one of the seminal moments in American history in the social justice movement. I've heard you on various networks talk about that a year ago, and I know how much how you're concerned about today, but I'm particularly interested in young people who are now playing this game and their role in what is happening in our country. How do you view that?
I've been so proud, Paul, to see young people, young student athletes, young students, young people in general get involved. When we look even at the civil rights movement of the 60s, we tend to forget that Martin Luther King was in his 30s, that John Lewis was in his 20s. I mean, we think of these people as older folks who were mature. No, this was a young people's movement. And I'm not in any way comparing it to that, but what I am saying is that the youth breed energy. They breed a new energy and a new understanding about what's happening around the world. And they have sometimes a naivety that we don't have when we get a little bit older. Outside of that, when it comes to athletes, there has long been this feeling with athletes that you had to stay in your place. Your place is between those white lines. Do your best between the white lines. Don't say anything outside of that. If you're on a court, dribble the basketball and shut up. And what we're seeing is that people are pushing back against that and saying, no, I come from whatever community I come from. I pay taxes. I vote. I care about my brothers and sisters. I care about what's happening. I care about voting, whatever the issue may be. And you're seeing this people rise up and say collectively, I'm going to lend my voice to these issues. And not only that, I'm going to take the time to understand what I'm fighting for. What you don't want is people speaking about things that they know not of. But what I've seen from young people, even from the colleges and the SEC, the football teams that have come together and had listen and learns, that they've learned about the history of our country and those sorts of things. There's a desire to understand with the hope of bringing unity that truly sports is able to bring in a way that nothing else really can.
You mentioned 20 years ago when you were a student and an athlete. Did you want to speak out on issues, or did you feel like you could versus where we are right now?
If what happened last year happened then, I would not feel the freedom, obviously, that I have now as an adult. But even comparing what I see and how I've spoken to so many of the student athletes, especially on campus in Athens, having conversations with some of those young men about what they're struggling with, I do remember speaking about certain things, but there wasn't an acceptance that we see now, even from coaches. I would say that from a leadership standpoint, from the president of universities to the coaches and on down, there is an expectation, or at least an open door, to facilitating these conversations. Now whether that's genuine or not, there is an expectation that a coach at least address some of these issues, and I think the players appreciate that.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.